Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today in this video, we will be talking about literary devices and figure of speech. Literary devices are the tools used by authors to enhance the structure and narrative style of the work. It includes figure of speeches and other techniques related to enhance the meaning of the structure. Figure of speeches are a very important part of any literature. They are like ornaments of the text. Aristotle, many years back in his Poetics, had talked about figure of speech when he was defining tragedy. He says, tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of certain magnitude. Language embellished with each kind of artistic ornaments. Several kinds been found in the play in the form of an action, not of narrative. Through pity and fear, affecting the proper catharsis of these emotions. Longinus also talked about the importance of using figure of speech in his treatise on the sublime. He gives 5 sources of sublimity, which is great thought, strong emotions, certain figure of speeches, noble diction, and dignified word arrangements. So here in this video, we are going to discuss literary devices and figure of speeches. Prolepsis. Prolepsis is an anticipation either in rhetoric or in narrative. It is a representation or assumption of a future act of development as if presently existing or accomplished. For example, Hamlet's last words, "I am dead, Horatio." When Hamlet says this to Horatio, he is not yet physically dead, but is anticipating his death. Here Hamlet acknowledges that he is going to die soon. Second example is from Keats's Isabella. There's one line. So the 2 brothers and their murdered man rode past fair Florence. The line referred to the lover of Isabella, the murdered man. This line is an example of prolepsis because it foreshadows the murder of Lorenzo, Isabella's lover, even though he is still alive at this point in the narrative. Metonymy. Metonymy is a figure of speech in which an object or concept is replaced with a word closely related to or suggested by the original. For example, using White House for the US president, crown in place of king, pen for literature or the words. Meiosis. The word meiosis literally means to make smaller. In literature, statements that deliberately downplay a situation or understatements that serve to actually highlight a situation and create dramatic irony are referred to as meiosis. For example, in William Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet, we see an example of this when the character of Mercutio is stabbed and he utters the words, I, a scratch. In Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The Black Cat, we see a good example of meiosis when he refers to some serious upcoming events as a series of household events. Synesthesia. Synesthesia is a term related to neurology in which stimulation of one sense causes the automatic experience of another sense. For example, tasting words or linking colors to the numbers. In literature, the term is applied to the description of one sensory experience by using the term of another sense. For example, loud color, soft voice, bright sound, sweet music, bitter cold. In Othello, Iago uses a dialogue to warn Othello about the danger of jealousy. Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. Here Iago characterized the feeling of jealousy with green color. Here jealousy becomes a living colored thing. Our common idiom now of being green with envy comes from this Shakespeare's tragedy Othello. In Ode to Grecian Urn, Keats has used synesthesia. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. When melodies, a hearing experience, are associated with taste, it is an example of synesthesia. Enjambment. Enjambment is the continuation of a sentence or clause across a line break, meaning the sentence or the clause runs over from one line to the next without a pause or punctuation. For example, I wonder by my troth, what thou and I did till we loved. Here, the thought initiated in the first line is carried seamlessly into the second line. Satire. Satire is a way of criticizing people or ideas in a humorous way. Satire is different from comedy, as comedy's end purpose is to create laughter. However, satire uses laughter as a weapon to ridicule the follies in the person or society. There are different kinds of satires. One is formal satire. In formal satire, a person speaks out in the first person. This I may address either the reader or the character within the work. There are two types of formal satires. One is Horatian satire and Juvenile satire. Horatian satire is in more light-hearted way intending to create laughter to encourage moral improvement. Pope's The Rape of the Lock is considered to be the best example of Horatian satire, as it describes and ridicules the trivial dispute between two aristocratic families. Juvenile satire, on the other hand, is more bitter and dark in its tone. The famous example of juvenile satire is Samuel Johnson's London and the Vanity of Human Wishes, and Swift's Modest Proposal. Second type of satire is indirect satire. Indirect satire is when the writer doesn't directly address the reader but tells a story instead. In the story, the characters' thoughts, words, and actions show how foolish or wrong they are. Sometimes the writer also adds comments or a certain style to make them seem even more ridiculous. One type of indirect satire is Menippean satire. This form of satire modeled on a Greek philosopher Menippean. Such satires are usually written in prose, with some parts including verses. Such satires often have a mixed form tied together by a loosely constructed story. A key feature is long dialogues and debates among talkative eccentrics, pedants, literary figures, and professionals or philosophers. These characters often make their viewpoints seem absurd through the arguments they present. It attacks mental state rather than particular individual. Lawrence Sterne's Tristam Shandy is the best example of Menippean satire. Irony. In most modern critical sense of the term, irony means the sense of dissembling, conceal or disguise one's true feeling or beliefs, or of hiding what is actually the case. Not, however, in order to deceive, but to achieve special rhetorical or artistic effect. There are also many kinds of irony. Verbal irony. Verbal irony is a statement in which the meaning that speaker implies differs sharply from the meaning that is expressed. For example, in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Mark Antony gives a speech in which he repeatedly refers to Brutus as an honorable man, when Brutus participated in murdering Caesar. Verbal irony also occurs in Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock, when Baron responds to Sir Plume with the words, "It grieves me much who speaks so well should ever speak in vain." The apparent meaning is that the Baron is genuinely saddened that Sir Plume's eloquent plea has gone unheard. However, the implied meaning is quite the opposite. The Baron is not at all grieved, and Sir Plume's speech is far from well spoken. The irony lies in the context. Sir Plume's stammered and ineffective plea was hardly eloquent, and the Baron is mocking rather than sympathizing. Structural irony. Structural irony occurs when perspective of the unreliable narrator or naive protagonist is different from the reality of the situation. For example, Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift. It is a juvenile satire in which protagonists suggest the people of Ireland that to evade themselves from the poverty, they should sell their children to the elite class, by thus making money and solving the problem of overpopulation. Narrator's logical and practical proposal to sell children as food for the wealthy starkly contrast with the moral and human reality of the situation. Swift uses the narrator to satirize Irish politicians, English landlords, and the neglect of Irish poor, It does not literally advocate for killing the children but uses the shocking proposal to emphasize the dire conditions of Irish civilians and criticize the exploitation by the ruling class. Dramatic irony. Dramatic irony occurs when the audience or readers are aware of information or circumstances in the narrative that a character is unaware of. This creates tension or humor as the character unknowingly acts in a way that are inappropriate or ironic given the actual circumstances. For example, in Sophocles' Oedipus the King, the audience knows that Oedipus himself is the murderer he seeks, creating a tragic irony as he curses the murderer and vows to find him. In Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, Malvolio becomes a victim of dramatic irony when he finds a fake letter suggesting Olivia loves him. The audience knows the truth, making his confidence absurd and humorous. Situational irony. Situational irony occurs when there is a significant difference between what is expected to happen and what actually happens. This contrast often surprises the audience or readers and creates a memorable twist in the narrative. For example, in O. Henry's The Gift of Magi. In this short story, a poor couple sacrifices their most prized possessions to buy gifts for each other. The wife sells her hair to buy a chain for her husband's watch, while the husband sells his watch to buy combs for his wife's hair. The irony lies in the fact that their gifts are now useless despite their love and sacrifice. Cosmic irony. Cosmic irony, also known as irony of fate, occurs when fate, destiny, or deity seems to play a cruel joke on humans by manipulating events to give them false hopes, only to lead to frustration or despair. This type of irony emphasizes the helplessness of humans against the larger forces of the universe. For example, Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This novel, as the protagonist faces a series of tragic events that appear created by fate. Despite her innocence and efforts to lead a good life, circumstances beyond her control lead to her downfall. Hardy portrays fate as an indifferent, almost malicious force that manipulates Tess's life, creating false hope, only to crush it cruelly. Romantic irony. Romantic irony involves the author's deliberate disruption of the illusion of reality in a work. The author creates a believable narrative but then breaks the fourth wall to remind readers that the story is construct of their imagination. This approach reveals the writer's creative control and highlights the artificiality of the narrative. For example, Don Juan by Lord Byron. In this satirical poem, Byron frequently interrupts the narrative to address the reader directly, comment on his own storytelling, or comes up with personal opinions. This self-awareness exposes the fictionality of the work and reminds the reader that they are reading a constructed story, not reality. The other example is Tristam Shandy by Lawrence Sterne. This novel is a masterpiece in romantic irony. Sterne frequently disturbs the flow of the story with digressions, incomplete thoughts, and direct address to the reader. At one point, he even leaves a page blank and tells reader to imagine something for themselves. By doing so, Sterne draws attention to the fact that he is the creator, controlling every aspect of the narrative. Socratic irony. Socratic irony is when someone pretends to know less than they actually do. It takes its name from the Greek philosopher Socrates, who used to ask questions and opinions to his students. Although these opinions upon his continued questioning turn out to be ill-grounded or to lead to absurd consequences. So this was it for the video. If you like the video, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe.